The dysfunction of New York City and state knows no limits. Yesterday, everyone got an alert to their cell phone telling them to turn off their unnecessary use of air conditioning. The heat wave was so intense, everybody was pumping out air conditioning, and the grid was on the verge of collapse. Now, this is glorious mismanagement. Because while that's happening, Times Square be lit up bright as day. A lot of people are complaining, saying, why are we being told to shut off our power when Times Square is perfectly normal? Maybe you should conserve power in other areas before telling people they can't have no AC. But this is it. I mean, this is the dysfunction of New York City, where crime is skyrocketing. Ocasio-Cortez comes out claiming crime isn't skyrocketing, it's hysteria. And people keep voting for this. And you know what? This tweet right here that I've highlighted is the perfect example of what's wrong with our political climate. The Sunrise Movement responded to the emergency alert saying, residents of NYC got this emergency alert in the past hour. What is, quote, unnecessary use of air conditioning if people need it to survive a global heat wave? My brain, it's about to burst from my skull and escape and flee this world because it can no longer contain the absurdity that it is trying to ingest and understand. My friends, the Sunrise Movement is an anti-climate change activist group advocating for more use of personal air conditioning. Y'all, you don't get to have your cake and eat it too. If you want people to cut down on energy consumption because you're concerned about climate change, that means air conditioning. Yes, it also means people die. This is what I can't stand about the climate change people. Bro, we are facing very serious ethical and moral problems in this world. We talked about it in great detail yesterday over at timcast.com. Check it out. It's the members only podcast with Ben Stewart. I was talking to Alex Jones on the show. You may have seen the episode we did. We did 2 episodes. One got banned. And I said, Alex, what if the elites are right? And that if we don't stop the massive population growth and expansion and consumption of energy, that we will be effectively like yeast, farting ourselves to death. And he said, I asked myself that question, right? So let's think about this. These climate change people come out and they say, we want to shut down the use of fossil fuels now, like Greta Thunberg. Yeah, that would result in probably tens of millions dying overnight. Energy production would collapse. I think one of the first groups of people to die if they actually implemented this would be diabetics, because they need refrigerators for their insulin. It's a very serious problem. You also do have to consider air conditioning keeps people alive. It's a fact. In this heat wave, it is true. Older people will die. People will get heat stroke. People will get dehydrated. They will die. The same is true in the winter when it gets really cold. Extreme temperatures result in death. So what have we done? Well, we as human beings use fossil fuels to generate electricity. And there are other means of generating electricity, don't get me wrong, but they're not nearly as effective. So when we need to accommodate tens of millions of people in a heat wave in one city, yeah, it's going to strain our electrical grid. And that's a reality. All of these leftist socialists who keep saying things like scarcity doesn't exist. We can just give everyone free healthcare. I'm like, bro, you need medicines, you need machines, you need raw materials. People have to do the work to get those things. You can't just snap your fingers and cure all diseases. It's not like Elysium where they have these big bathtub machine things you lay in and it cures you of all ailments. That's genuinely what they believe. When you have a crisis like this in New York City and the climate change people are like, people should be using more air conditioning. It's like, well, you're not reversing climate change, advocating for more consumption. Maybe you need to realize people will not survive a normal heat wave, let alone your climate change heat wave, if you take away their air conditioning. However, your goals require you take away their air conditioning. So answer me that question. What do you want? A culling? Yeah, that's the serious conundrum. To those who believe that the planet is aflame, this is what they propose, a paradox. There's literally nothing you can do to be right with these people. The city said, let me read you the emergency alert that went out to New York. Conserve energy. NYC is urging all households and businesses to immediately limit energy usage to prevent power outages as the intense heat continues. Please avoid the use of energy-intensive appliances, such as washers, dryers, and microwaves. Limit unnecessary use of air conditioning. Unnecessary use of air conditioning, Sunrise Movement, would be like people air conditioning their bathrooms when they're not using them, or air conditioning parts of their house they're not going to be in. If you live in a moderately sized home, you could be like, hey, shut off the AC in those other rooms and we'll just hang out in the living room. You can conserve. It's possible. In fact, there's a chart that shows after the city put out this alert, energy usage did go down, preventing a collapse of the grid. Why are they mad? I'll tell you this. I'll tell you why. Because these leftists, these activist groups, don't offer up any solutions. What they do is they come out and they say, you are wrong, period. We don't care. So when you're like, okay, we've got a mass energy consumption problem. Let's ask people to stop using their AC when they don't need to. How dare you tell people not to use their AC? Don't you know global warming is going to kill people? Really? Yeah. You take a look at what goes on with these people, with how the city is managed. Look at this. Ali Bowman tweeted, thousands of New Yorkers are without power Wednesday night. So the grid actually started going down. NYC Mayor and Con Edison are pleading with residents to conserve energy to avoid even bigger outages. Stephen L. Miller says, meanwhile, look at all the lights behind her in Times Square. These cities are run by corrupt morons. We got to conserve power or the grid will fail. Quick, everyone else turn things off, but Times Square is going to advertise to the world. Somebody tweeted something like, they want you to shut off your air conditioning. Meanwhile, they're hoping the International Space Station can still see Times Square. How about you turn off Times Square? That'll save some power. They never think that way. And this right here is what you got to understand about all of these activists. Why should I have to turn off my air conditioning? Because you want to conserve energy. And and most of the consumption comes from the individual. Here's the name of the game. Powerful and wealthy elites, corrupt politicians, many progressives will tell you, you can't have air conditioning, but we're going to have our bright lights in the big city. They're going to tell you, you can't fly on planes because that's producing too many emissions, but I've got 3 private jets. You need to reduce the size of your carbon footprint and downsize your home and be a minimalist. But I've got a 50-bedroom mansion with hundreds of windows and a golf course. I was in California. Oh, California, we love you. There was a drought happening several years ago, and I went to a town called East Porterville where they had run out of water. Poor people, many migrants, had their wells run dry because the farmers didn't have access to surface water because the cities voted that away. So the farmers began drilling thousands of feet into the earth to find groundwater so they could continue to water their crops to feed people, mainly in the cities. Well, that resulted in the smaller, more shallow wells where people lived going dry. Many of these wells were only drilled down to like 30 feet or so to find groundwater. And that's where most people got their water for their homes. Across the street from East Porterville was a golf course. And the grass was fairly green. And they said, well, we got to have our golf course. And we asked, couldn't you run water to these homes or divert the water from your golf course to the people? And they were like, well, to be fair, and honestly, it was a separate city. It was Porterville and East Porterville, the different cities. So the water mains don't just connect. So they couldn't just flick a switch and then have the water go to those towns. They were on wells. But they could have created a system where instead of spraying sprinklers on their lawns, they could have created potable water relief systems for people to go up and actually get access to this water to fill barrels and use for their homes. Instead, they brought in trucks of non-potable water where the people could wash, they could take brief showers but couldn't drink it. And they had to go to churches to get access to clean drinking water. That was amazing. The churches were bringing in bottled water to save the people while the cities were watering their golf courses. That's what you can expect from these elites. When they talk about a sustainable future and the Great Reset and you will own nothing and you will be happy. Yeah, they're telling you you'll be a serf. They're telling you that they'll tell you to shut your power down and their glorious capital city will operate as normal. Yes, the planet may be aflame, they say. But in order for us to preserve our way of life, you must sacrifice. Now, is that any way to live? Maybe. Honestly, maybe. Maybe we should all sacrifice and then just recognize that some people will have more luxury than others. Does it make sense to take away the air conditioning from everyone just because we want to be fair? No, that does sound kind of communistic. But then you have the alternative of, in communist countries, the party members eat like kings, they're overweight, they get all the fancy amenities, and the people suffer. It's hard to find a balance and know exactly how to run these things. But I just love how they're warning everybody, and the Sunrise Movement says we are building a movement of young people to stop climate change, but y'all get to keep your air conditioning. Pick one, dude. Pick one. I'm sick and tired of this narrative where people say, you know, the biggest contributor to climate change is the corporations. They think that all the pollution is the fault of the corporation. Technically, that's the truth, but y'all keep buying 50 kinds of peanut butter. Y'all keep buying air conditioners. Individuals buying up plastics, running their lights all day and their air conditioning all day. Those are the people that are contributing to climate change. And you know what? Yes, if you look at one megacorp and say, here's how much carbon they produced, and the one person clearly produces less. Unfortunately, there's one megacorp and there's 8 billion people. It's decentralization. So yes, the solution may be that if you don't want climate change and you're scared about the consumption of energy, you turn off your air conditioning. And don't say, but we need it to survive the heat wave. Well, we know that. I know people need fossil fuels to heat and cool their homes. But like Greta Thunberg said, shut her down, right? Shut her down. Not today. Not in 2030, not in 2028, not in 2022. Now. Do it. See what happens. You will have an army of mom and pops running around with Molotov cocktails. You will radicalize normal people against the establishment, against the left in 2 seconds. And it's not because these people want to sit in comfort. It's because some people's grandmothers may die. It's because some people's diabetic children may die. It's because people need access to energy to be able to get food, and then the food will start to run dry. These people are insane. I mean, just take a look at this story out of New York. AOC dismissal of rising crime rates comes despite massive spikes in own city. That's right. And people keep voting for this. They voted her back in. Incredible. And I ain't giving no free passes to no Republicans. People keep voting for Mitch McConnell. Progressive firebrand rep AOC tried to tamp down talk of a recent crime surge in the United States despite a double-digit spike in the number of shooting deaths in her home city. Quote, "We are seeing these headlines about percentage increases," the New York Democrat said during a virtual town hall meeting. "Now, I want to say that any amount of harm is unacceptable and too much. But I also want to make sure that this hysteria, that this doesn't drive a hysteria, and that we look at these numbers in context so that we can all make responsible decisions about what to allocate in that context." Yeah, it's called cops. It's called stop defunding the police. It's called manage your city properly. No, but you get people like AOC are like, hysteria. Sorry, that lady who got stabbed was complaining about it. Maybe she should just shut her mouth and not spread hysteria. AOC, who was discussing the situation with Jamal Bowman, once again defended the idea of defunding the police. Isn't this amazing? Do you see the paradox? Please wake up. You have the Sunrise Movement being like, we must fight climate change, but we're not going to turn off our air conditioning. And you get AOC saying, ignore the increase in crime. It's hysteria, and defund the police. Yo, the people in New York who are suffering the crime are asking for more police. Man, you get what you ask for with these people. Her comments follow a spate of alarming statistics about an increase in violent crime across the country. During the first 5 months of 2021, gunfire killed more than 8,100 people in the country, which is about 54 deaths per day. The average of the same period of time during the past 6 years was 14 deaths per day. Yowza! That is brutal, man. The newspaper and the nonprofit research organization found the number of casualties and the number of shootings that have killed or injured at least one person are on pace to beat 2020 numbers, which finishes the deadliest year in terms of gun violence in 20 years. Now, I'm a gun fan. People have a right to keep and bear arms. And I think in these big cities, you start to get into very serious moral and ethical conundrums. Proximity suppresses rights. That's that simple. I mean, people suppress rights. But when you have two people and they live next to each other with paper thin walls, you can't be noisy. The other person's going to complain. And it's really interesting what the laws are. I guess you're allowed to be noisy. You are until between like the hours of like 9 a.m. and like 10 p.m. But could you imagine living in a little cubicle in a city that smells like sour milk? And then all of a sudden you hear someone blasting like Barbie Girl over and over again, or I don't know, whatever. What do people listen to? Post Malone. And I guess maybe if you like the music, you're cool with it. But maybe you got to work on a project. Maybe you're trying to write up a paper. Maybe you just got home for work and you work the graveyard shift and you're like, dude, oh, this is miserable. So what happens in places like New York, people have guns. They try to arrest those people with guns. People with guns go and shoot other people. People lose their lives. It's a tough problem to solve. I'll tell you what you don't do. You don't defund the police when you're trying to solve serious problems. In what reality does taking away police result in crime stopping? So like these people that are going around and shooting people are like, oh man, there's less cops, I better stop. That makes no sense. Now there is a potential for de-escalation. Like people might say, I'm not worried about carrying certain weapons because the cops won't be coming, but they're worried about each other, not the police. When the cops come, maybe someone, like in LA all those years ago, like 92 or whatever, we saw the guys with the armor piercing rounds, or were they like steel core or something? I don't know. And so they launched the SWAT teams and things like that. In places like New York, people are fighting each other. So you know what you need? You need well-funded police. You need police who have good training. You have different divisions of the police department. There's community response. They're like, we need social workers. Well, we have the community policing division. So how about we send out those guys? They're less equipped, still equipped. Maybe we research the problems. Maybe we try to think about the problem and then actually solve it. Unfortunately, with people like AOC, they choose empty platitudes. Defund the police. What does that mean? What are you doing? Crime is skyrocketing. Shootings are on the rise. Petty theft on the rise. People are screaming and begging for help, and you're like, you're just hysterical. I love it. And I wonder how many of these victims are actually women. Because you think about stealing from someone. Guy might have a wallet. Guy could also fight you. Woman has a purse. Snatch the purse. Now, victims of violent crime tend to be men, but that's probably for different reasons. They mention in New York City, shooting incidents in May jumped 73% compared to the same period last year. The overall hate crimes have increased by 98% this year. This is crazy. Crimes against the LGBTQ community jumped 188% this year. And all of these people keep voting for the likes of AOC who tell them to shut their mouths. You do not get police. And these people genuinely believe this stuff. They genuinely believe that the cops are evil, snarling monsters like, we're going to go oppress the marginalized. No. If you're walking down the street and someone is screaming at you, the cop's probably going to stop them. Now, I'll tell you this, man. You got to be careful about New York because corruption exists. I was at a bar. So I lived just on the other side of the Manhattan Bridge in New York. I was at a bar with some friends and I was super tired. I don't drink. And so I called a cab and I said, here's my address. You just drive straight across the bridge and then that takes you to Broadway. And then you drive down Broadway for about a mile and then boom, there's my apartment. So I get in this cab, yellow cab. We drive across the bridge and I zonk out. I wake up literally like within a minute or two on the other side of the bridge and the dude is zigzagging between blocks. You know why? He's driving up the meter. He thought I was passed out. And so I asked him, well, where are you going? He's like, don't worry about it. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to my house. It's just right on Broadway. He was zigzagging. And the bill was like $15. So I was like, stop the car. Let me out. Where are you taking me? And he said, no. We get to a light. And then right as like where he's slowing down for a light, I say, stop the car now. He refuses. I pop the door and jump out as he hits the accelerator. And then I immediately, the guy gets out of his car and starts coming up to me, screaming at me. So I call 911. I'm like, this guy was driving in circles and was trying to keep me in his car. The cops came up to me, threatened me with arrest, took my wallet from me, took my cash from my wallet, told me to shut up. And I was like, this cab driver was trying to rip me off, was keeping me trapped in his car. I had to jump out while it was moving. I called you for help and they told me to shove it. And they said, give us your wallet or we're arresting you. No joke. They took the cash. I had like $15. They were trying to claim I owed the cab driver now $50 because he was waiting. And I was like, dude, the bill was $15. I came from across the bridge. See, the issue is sometimes they have to work with these cabs. There's the city has to deal with the lobbyists from these cabs. You can't trust all these cops all the time. Sometimes you get bad cops. That's true. But I'll tell you this. I can tell you every story in the book that I've encountered with good cops and bad cops. And the reality is we just need better training for cops. We need better systems. We need better oversight. We need better reform. AOC doesn't care about that. These climate change people don't care about that. What do they care about? They care about claiming that they're right no matter what. They care about claiming you're wrong no matter what. It's not hard for me to be like, yo, I had a bad experience with cops. But I'm not stupid. I understand that those problems come along with it. And we need to find a way to improve policing. And that probably means more funding. I can tell you all the nasty stories I've seen with cops abusing people, arresting people during protests, Tony Baloney pepper spraying those girls during Occupy Wall Street. And I still have to come to the logical conclusion. We got bad cops, we deal with it. You got bad people, you deal with it. If a human being commits a crime, what do? We charge them and convict them and they pay a penalty of some sort. I mean, like, they go to jail or they pay a fine. And the same thing with police. They act a fool, we need oversight. We don't abolish the police. Imagine if they were like, crime is a problem, so we're just going to execute every criminal to get rid of them. We're going to abolish criminals. It's like, I know they're not saying execute cops. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. A lot of them are saying that. Did you get my point? I'm glad I don't live in this place anymore. And this is one of the reasons why I left. Mismanagement is an understatement. It is decrepit. It is awful. And I remember this video during the lockdown. This guy's walking through the Upper West Side going, Fox News says New York. He's holding his phone. Fox News says that New York is collapsing. Oh, no, look, there's ice cream and hot dogs. And he starts laughing. He's like, stop watching Fox News. The funniest thing about it is, bro, on the Upper West Side where all the rich people live, we get that you had power and you had ice cream and you had hot dogs. And I tried to go to Central Brooklyn. I thought so. Yeah, the rich people telling you, the poor people, to shove it while they extract and watch your communities burn. People like AOC. I know crime is up. You're hysterical. Defund the police. We need to end climate change. We need to shut down the fossil fuel industry, but I'll be damned if I'm giving up my air conditioning. Is that your message? Tighten your belts, right? I'll let you guys know something, though. We have geothermal air conditioning out here, and I don't know much about it. It was here when we moved in. The way it works is, you know how air conditioning works? You got this big thing, and it compresses and decompresses, I think, Freon. And the compression releases heat, and the decompression absorbs heat, which makes the air more cool. And then it blows the colder air inside and blows the hotter air outside. It's brilliant technology. However, if it's really, really hot outside, it's very difficult to move heat because you're trying to move heat into a space where it's already hot. The energy can't transfer. What ends up happening is people consume way more energy, desperate to keep their temperatures low. Some of these people in New York were saying that even with their AC on full blast, they were only able to keep their homes to like the high 80s. And in Seattle, where it was like 112 or whatever, people were like, my apartment's 90 degrees with AC on full blast because you can only move so much heat. That brings me to geothermal. Geothermal AC works by having copper coils run underground where the temperature is always around 55 degrees. That means even when it's 100 degrees outside, they can take heat from in your home and push it underground where it easily dissipates. And then the 55 degree, copper coils that come back in, they blow the air to blow the cold into the house. It's really brilliant stuff. I guess a lot of people are saying it's expensive. They can't afford it. I'm not entirely sure. And you can't do this in New York because you need like certain amount of space underground. The reason I'm bringing this up is it's very simple. When it comes to climate change, living out in the middle of nowhere is the smart thing to do. But these people desperately want to live in their big cities where they take big dumps and dump all that trash into the ocean. When you live in the middle of nowhere, you're on welled water, replenishes with rain for the most part. You're on a septic system, self-regulates for the most part. And you still got to get pumped periodically, but a lot better than big cities that just have these giant water reclamation plants and they're just pumping sewage into the ocean. You're more likely to find that people have solar panels. You're more likely to find that people have their own sources of energy. But the people who want to live close together, moving the human waste out of a city and moving food in consumes massive amounts of energy. All of these people who claim to be fighting for climate change or whatever, but then demand they be allowed to use their AC is hilarious. You are an exponential drain on our resources in those cities. And then you have the nerve to say we deserve more AC. Out in the middle of nowhere, we have big open fields. Not everybody, but you can run geothermal relatively easily. I guess people say it's more expensive, but the truth is it's less expensive in the long run. It's one of those things like solar. You install solar, it's expensive to do it first, but over time, you end up saving money on electricity. It's not perfect. Far from perfect. I'm not going to pretend I'll have all the answers, and it's just that. These people claim to. In reality, what they want power. They want to tell you to sacrifice so they live in luxury. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.